Welcome to Storyloft, a gentle refuge for hearts that feel like they are carrying the weight of the world, and for those who are there for them. Today, we are opening a window into the lives of 3 individuals who've walked the challenging path of anxiety. These stories are shared with courage. They remind us we're not alone in our struggles. Anxiety can feel like a heavy blanket, muffling the colors of life. But within each story, we find threads of hope. Here at Storyloft, we understand. We see you, your fears, your worries, your sleepless nights. They are all valid. This is a place where your experiences are heard and honored. If you have a story nestled in your heart, one that might reach out and touch someone else who struggles, we would be privileged to hear it. You can share your journey with us at storyloft@outlook.com. You can also find this email address in the description box below. Your words and your experiences, they matter. They could be the whisper of hope someone needs to hear, the hand that helps them hold on for one more day. As we share these stories, we invite you to find a quiet moment, take a deep breath, allow yourself to simply just be, without judgment. You're safe in this space here. If these stories resonate with you, if they bring you even a flicker of comfort or understanding, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us reach more souls who might be feeling lost and lonely. Now, let's gently open our hearts to these 3 profound stories of individuals facing anxiety. Their stories tell us that even in our darkest moments, we're connected by our shared human experience. Megan's heart raced as she stared at the clock on the wall of her dorm room. Each tick seemed to echo in her ears, a constant reminder of the impending doom she felt creeping closer. In less than 24 hours, she would be sitting in a large lecture hall, a critical midterm exam laid out before her. The mere thought made her palms sweat and her breathing shallow. This was not a new feeling for Megan. Ever since she could remember, tests had been her nemesis. It wasn't that she didn't know the material, quite the opposite. Megan was a diligent student, often spending hours poring over her textbooks and notes. She attended every lecture, participated in study groups, and even sought help from her professors during office hours. By all accounts, she should have been confident in her abilities. But when it came time to prove her knowledge, something inside Megan would break. The pressure would build like a dam about to burst, flooding her mind with doubt and fear. In past exams, she had experienced everything from mild trembling to full-blown panic attacks. The worst part was the feeling of betrayal by her own mind. All the information she had so carefully stored would seem to just vanish in an instant, leaving her staring blankly at the questions before her. As Megan lay on her bed, trying to review her notes one last time, the words swam before her eyes. She couldn't focus. Her thoughts raced from one worst-case scenario to another. What if she failed this test? What if she failed the class? Would she lose her scholarship? Would she have to drop out of college? The spiral of negative thoughts seemed endless. A soft knock on her door startled Megan out of her anxious daydream. It was her roommate, Emily. "Hey, Megan. I brought you some chamomile tea," Emily said, her voice lined with concern. "I thought it might help you relax a bit." Megan managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Em. I don't know what's wrong with me. I've studied so hard, but I just can't shake this feeling that I'm going to mess everything up tomorrow. Emily sat down on the edge of Megan's bed. I know it's tough, but you've got this. You're one of the smartest people I know. Is there anything I can do to help? Megan shook her head, fighting back tears. I don't think so. I wish I could be normal, you know? Everyone else seems to handle exams just fine. Why can't I? Emily reached out and squeezed Megan's hand. You're not alone in this, Megan. Lots of people struggle with test anxiety. Have you thought about talking to someone about it? Maybe the college counselor could help. The suggestion made Megan's stomach turn. The idea of admitting her weakness to a stranger felt almost as daunting as the exam itself. But as she looked at the genuine concern in Emily's eyes, she realized there was something that had to change. She couldn't keep living like this, dreading every test and letting anxiety control her life. Maybe you're right, Megan said quietly. I'll think about it. That night, Megan could not sleep. She tossed and turned, her mind replaying every possible scenario for the next day. When her alarm finally went off, she felt as though she had not slept at all. With shaky hands, she got dressed and gathered her materials for the exam. The walk to the lecture hall felt like a march to her own execution. Megan's legs felt very heavy, and each step was a battle against the urge to turn and run back to the safety of her dorm room. As she entered the hall and found her seat, the familiar feeling of panic began to rise in her chest. The professor started handing out the exam papers. Megan's vision blurred as she stared at the sheet in front of her, the questions blending together so that they couldn't even be read. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest and the sound drowning out everything else around her. You have 2 hours, the professor announced. You may begin. Megan picked up her pencil, but her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She read the first question once, twice, 3 times, but the words didn't seem to make any sense. It was happening again. All her words, all her knowledge, all her preparation slipping away in the face of overwhelming anxiety. Tears welled up in her eyes. She was going to fail. She was sure of it. The room seemed to be closing in around her, and she felt lightheaded. Just as she thought she might pass out, a memory surfaced. Something she had read late last night in a desperate search for help. Mindfulness techniques. The article had talked about grounding yourself in the present moment, focusing on your breath to calm your mind and body. Megan had dismissed this as New Age nonsense at the time, but now, in the depths of her panic, she was willing to try anything. Closing her eyes, Megan took a deep breath. She focused on the sensations of the air filling her lungs, then slowly released it. She did this again and again, tuning out the scratching of the pencils around her and the ticking of the clock on the wall. With each breath, she felt a little bit of the tension leave her body. Next, she tried to ground herself in her surroundings. She focused on the feeling of the chair beneath her, the texture of the paper under her fingers, the weight of the pencil in her hand. Slowly, the fog of panic began to lift. Opening her eyes, Megan looked down at the exam paper again. This time, the words came into focus. She read the first question, and to her surprise, she knew the answer. With still shaky hands, she began to write. As she worked through the exam, Megan continued to use the breathing techniques whenever she felt her anxiety rising. It wasn't a magic cure. She still felt nervous, and some questions still gave her pause. But it was manageable. For the first time in her college career, she made it through an entire exam without succumbing to panic. When she finally handed in her paper, Megan felt exhausted, but relieved. She had done it. She had faced her fear and managed to make it through to the other side. In the days that followed, as she waited for her results, Megan made a decision. She scheduled an appointment with the college counselor, determined to get help for her anxiety. She also began researching more about mindfulness and other coping techniques for stress and anxiety. When her exam results came back, Megan was shocked to see a B+ next to her name. It wasn't perfect, but it was far better than what she had ever managed before on a major exam. For the first time, she felt accomplished, thinking that maybe, just maybe, she would be able to overcome this. Over the next few months, Megan worked hard, not just on her studies, but on managing her anxiety. She attended regular counseling sessions, practiced mindfulness exercises daily, and even joined a support group for students with test anxiety. It was not always easy. There were still moments of doubt and fear, but slowly she began to see progress. By the time finals rolled around, Megan felt like a different person. As she sat down to take her exam, she still felt nervous, but it was a manageable nervousness, not the overwhelming panic of before. She used her breathing techniques, stayed present in the moment, and trusted in her preparation. And when the results came in, Megan could not believe her eyes. A's and B's across the board. Her best performance ever. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were tears of joy and pride. That evening, as she celebrated with Emily and her other friends, Megan reflected on her journey. The anxiety hadn't magically disappeared, and she knew she would likely always have to work at managing it. But she had proven to herself that she was stronger than her fears. She had found tools to cope, and in doing so had opened up a world of possibilities for her future. As she looked around at the smiling faces of her friends, Megan felt whole. For the first time in a long while, she felt excited about what the future might hold. She had overcome one of her biggest challenges, and in doing so had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. Whatever came next, Megan knew she was ready to face it, one breath at a time. Jake stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, his heart pounding so hard he could almost see it through his t-shirt. The muffled sound of laughter and chatter from the hallway seemed to mock him. It was a constant reminder of the world he couldn't quite reach. He splashed cold water on his face, hoping he would somehow wash away the anxiety that clung to him like a second skin. It was just another day at Westfield High, but for Jake, every day felt like a battle. At 16, he should have been in the prime of his teenage years, making friends, joining clubs, maybe even going on first dates. Instead, he felt trapped behind invisible walls, desperately wanting to connect, but paralyzed by an overwhelming fear of judgment and rejection. Taking a deep breath, Jake steeled himself to face the crowded hallway. He opened the bathroom door a crack, peering out like a cautious animal. The corridor was a sea of activity. Students laughing, shouting across the hall to friends, casually touching and hugging. To Jake, it looked like a minefield of potential social disasters. He stepped out, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor. His strategy, honed over years of social anxiety, was to become as invisible as possible. Don't make eye contact. Don't draw attention. Just get to class without incident. As he navigated the hallway, Jake's mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if someone tried to talk to him and he said something stupid? What if he tripped and everyone laughed? What if people were already laughing at him and he just couldn't hear it over the noise? A group of popular kids were gathered near his locker. Jake's stomach clenched. He needed his history book, but the thought of approaching the group made him feel physically ill. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he debated what to do. Go to class without the book and risk getting in trouble? Or face the gauntlet of social interaction? After a moment's hesitation that felt like an eternity, Jake ducked into a nearby classroom. He'd rather face the teacher's disappointment than navigate that social minefield. As he slipped into the empty room, he heard a burst of laughter from the hallway. Logically, he knew it probably had nothing to do with him, but anxiety does not listen to logic. In his mind, that laughter confirmed his worst fears. He was a joke, an outsider, someone not worthy of belonging. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of silent suffering. In class, Jake sat at the back, praying the teacher would not call on him. Every time a question was asked, he sank lower in his seat, his heart racing. He knew some of the answers, but the thought of speaking in front of everyone, of all those eyes turning to look at him, made him feel like he was going to pass out. During group work, Jake's anxiety peaked. As other students easily formed pairs and groups, chatting and laughing as they worked, Jake felt like an island unto himself. He tried to look busy, scribbling notes and pretending to be deeply focused on the task, but inside he was screaming. Why couldn't he just be normal? Why was something as simple as talking to classmates so terrifyingly difficult for him? Lunchtime, which should have been a break from the stress of class, was its own special kind of torture for Jake. The cafeteria, with its noise and chaos, was overwhelming. The simple act of finding a place to sit felt like an impossible puzzle to solve. Every table represented a potential for rejection, or worse, having to engage in conversation. Jake grabbed his lunch and headed for his usual spot, a quiet corner of the school library. It wasn't technically allowed, but the librarian had taken pity on him months ago and now turned a blind eye. As he ate his sandwich in solitude, Jake watched other students through the library window. They were laughing, sharing food, playfully pushing each other. The scene made his chest ache with longing and shame. He remembered a time years ago when things had been different, when he was younger, before the anxiety had taken hold. He had friends. He had been invited to birthday parties and sleepovers. What had changed? Sometimes Jake felt like he'd woken up one day to find that everyone else had been given a secret manual on how to be a person, and he'd somehow missed out. As he picked at his lunch, Jake's phone buzzed. For a brief, hopeful moment, he thought someone might have texted him. But it was just a news alert. He sighed, scrolling through his nearly empty contacts list. There were plenty of names, classmates he had to exchange numbers with for group projects, distant relatives, old friends he'd long lost touch with. But no one he could actually call a friend now. No one he could text just to chat or hang out with after school. The afternoon brought a fresh wave of anxiety as Jake faced his most dreaded class, physical education. It wasn't the physical activity that bothered him. It was the locker room, the team selections, the constant requirement to interact and coordinate with others. As he changed into his gym clothes, keeping his eyes fixed firmly on the floor, he could hear others joking and talking around him. The easy camaraderie they shared made him feel even more isolated. In the gym, the teacher announced they'd be playing basketball. Jake's stomach dropped again. Team sports were his worst nightmare. So many opportunities to mess up in front of everyone, to let people down, to be the last one picked. As the captain started choosing teams, Jake tried to make himself as small as possible. With each name called that wasn't his, he felt a mix of relief, but also humiliation. Relief at not having to face the pressure of being on a team yet, humiliation at being so obviously unwanted. When he was finally picked last, as always, he wished the ground would open up and swallow him whole. The game itself was a blur of anxiety and awkwardness. Jake tried to stay out of the way, to not touch the ball, to be invisible. But in a team sport, invisibility is impossible. When the ball was passed to him, he fumbled it, his hands shaking so badly he could barely grip it. He heard sighs of frustration from his teammates, saw eye rolls and head shakes. Each one felt like a dagger to his already fragile self-esteem. After school, Jake hurried to his locker, eager to escape the social gauntlet of high school. As he was shoving books into his backpack, he overheard a group of classmates making plans for the weekend. They were talking about a party, excited about who might be there, what they would wear. Jake felt a familiar pang of longing and fear. Part of him desperately wanted to be included in something like that, to know what it felt like to look forward to a social event instead of dreading it. But the mere thought of being at a party, surrounded by people, expected to talk and interact, made his palms sweat and his heart race. On the bus ride home, Jake put in his earbuds, letting music drown out the chatter around him. He stared out the window, watching the familiar streets pass by. Each day felt the same, a constant battle against his own mind, a struggle to do the things that seemed to come so easily to everyone else. As he walked the short distance from the bus stop to his house, Jake felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on him. Another day survived, but at what cost? How long could he go on like this, feeling so disconnected from the world around him? He reached his front door and paused, his hand on the knob. Inside, he knew his mom would ask about his day, hopeful for some sign that things were getting better. Jake would paste on a smile and say everything was fine, protecting her from the truth of his daily struggles. It was easier that way, to keep the full extent of his pain to himself. Taking a deep breath, Jake opened the door, stepping from one isolated world into another. The invisible walls of his anxiety came with him. They were a constant companion he could not shake. As he called out a half-hearted greeting to his mom, Jake wondered, not for the first time, if he would ever find a way to break free from the prison that anxiety had created for him. Mia stared at her phone, her thumb hovering over the decline button as her best friend Zoe's name flashed on the screen. This was the third time Zoe had called this week, and for the third time Mia felt her chest tighten at the thought of answering. She let it ring until the screen went dark, then buried her face in her pillow, a familiar feeling of relief and guilt washing over her. At 16 years old, Mia's world had become increasingly small. What once felt like a life full of possibilities now seemed to have shrunk to the confines of her bedroom. The pale blue walls that had once been a backdrop of laughter-filled sleepovers and study sessions now felt like they were closing in around her, like a physical manifestation of the anxiety that had taken root in her mind. Mia rolled onto her back, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, remnants of more carefree times. She could hear her mom moving around downstairs, probably making dinner. The thought of facing another family meal, with its expectations of conversation and normalcy, made her stomach churn. Her phone buzzed again, a text this time. Mia picked it up, reading Zoe's message. "Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay? Miss you." The words blurred as tears welled up in Mia's eyes. She missed Zoe too. She missed the easy friendship they once had. But the thought of responding, of having to explain her absence, or worse, pretending everything was fine, just felt so overwhelmingly difficult. What would she even say? How could she explain that the very idea of social interaction now filled her with complete and utter dread. Mia's anxiety had crept up on her slowly, like a tide coming in. At first, it was just a bit of nervousness before tests or presentations. Normal type stuff, she thought. But over time, that nervousness had grown, spreading into every aspect of her life. Now, even the simplest tasks like going to the store or answering a text or making small talk with a friend felt monumental. She thought back to the moment when things really started to change. It was at Zoe's birthday party 6 months ago. They were at a local pizza place, surrounded by friends, and there was music playing in the background. Mia had been laughing at something Zoe said when suddenly, without warning, she felt like she couldn't breathe. Her heart started racing, her palms got sweaty, and the room seemed to spin. She excused herself to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face and trying to calm down. When she returned to the table, she plastered on a smile and pretended everything was fine. But inside, she was terrified because she had no idea what was happening to her. That night marked the beginning of Mia's retreat from the world. At first, she just turned down invitations to bigger gatherings, making excuses about homework or family obligations. But as the anxiety grew, so did her list of excuses. Movie nights, study groups, even one-on-one hangouts became too much to handle. It was easier to stay home, where things felt safe and predictable. A knock on her bedroom door jolted Mia from her thoughts. "Honey?" her mom's voice called. "Dinner's ready. Will you be joining us tonight?" Mia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The concern in her mom's voice was clear, and it made Mia's heart ache. She knew her behavior was worrying for her parents. They tried talking to her, offering to listen, or to find someone to talk to. But Mia always brushed them off because she had no idea how to explain something that she didn't fully understand herself. "I'm not feeling well," Mia called back, her voice sounding weak even to her own ears. "I think I'll just stay in bed." There was a pause, and Mia could almost feel her mom's disappointment through the door. "Okay, sweetie. I'll save you a plate in case you get hungry later." As her mom's footsteps retreated down the hall, Mia felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over her. She was pushing everyone away, her friends, her family, and she knew it. But the alternative, facing the world and the anxiety it brought, seemed impossible. Mia's phone buzzed again. This time it was a group chat notification. Her friends were planning a trip to the mall this weekend. As she read through their excited messages, Mia felt a pang of longing. She wanted to be part of it, to feel that ease of excitement again. But the thought of the overcrowded mall, the expectation to socialize for hours, the potential for awkward silence, or saying the wrong thing, it all just felt so overwhelmingly daunting. Without responding, Mia put her phone on silent and shoved it under her pillow. Out of sight, out of mind. Or so she hoped. But even as she tried to distract herself with a book, she could feel the weight of unanswered messages and missed opportunities pressing down on her. The next morning, Mia woke up to the sound of her alarm, dread immediately setting in her stomach. Another school day loomed ahead, another day of navigating crowded hallways and forced interactions. She lay in bed, contemplating faking an illness to stay home. It wouldn't be the first time. But the thought of her parents' worried faces and the mounting schoolwork she'd have to catch up on made her reconsider. With heavy limbs, Mia dragged herself out of bed and got ready for school. Each step of her morning routine felt like a battle against her own mind. Shower, get dressed, brush teeth. Every normal action required conscious effort. Her anxiety, a constant whisper telling her just to give up and stay in bed. Downstairs, her parents were in the kitchen. Her dad was reading the newspaper while her mom packed lunches. The scene of normalcy made Mia feel like an outsider in her own home. "Morning, sweetie," her mom said with a hopeful smile on her face. I made your favorite breakfast. Blueberry pancakes. Mia's stomach churned at the thought of food. Thanks, Mom. But I'm not really hungry, she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. She could feel her parents exchange worried glances. Her dad cleared his throat. Mia, we were thinking, maybe it would be good for you to talk to somebody. A professional, I mean. We're worried about you, kiddo. Panic flared in Mia's chest. Talk to someone? The idea of sitting in a stranger's office, expected to pour out her feelings, made her want to run back to her room and never come out. I'm fine, she said quickly, grabbing her backpack. I've got to go. I'll be late for school. Before her parents could respond, Mia was out the door. The cool morning air hit her face, and she took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. The walk to school used to be a peaceful time, a chance to chat with neighbors or enjoy the morning. Now, it felt like running a gauntlet. Every approaching person on the sidewalk, every car that drove by, felt like a potential threat. As she neared the school, Mia could see groups of students gathered outside, laughing and talking before the first bell. She kept her head down, skirting around the edges of the crowd to get inside. In the hallway, she heard a familiar voice call her name. It was Zoe. Hey, Mia, wait up! Mia froze, her hands on her locker. She could pretend she hadn't heard, but Zoe was already at her side. Hey, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you, Zoe said, concern evident in her voice. Mia fumbled with her locker combination, avoiding Zoe's eyes. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I've just been really busy with stuff. Stuff? Zoe repeated, skepticism clear in her tone. Mia, what's going on? You never hang out anymore. You barely respond to messages. Did I do something wrong? The hurt in Zoe's voice made Mia's chest tighten. She wanted to explain, to tell her best friend about the anxiety that was consuming her life, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she make Zoe understand when she barely understood herself? No, you didn't do anything wrong, Mia said softly. I can't. I've got to go to class. Before Zoe could respond, Mia shut her locker and hurried down the hall, leaving her confused and hurt friend behind. As she slipped into her first period class, Mia felt the familiar feeling of isolation setting over her. She was here, surrounded by people, and yet she never felt so alone. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of anxiety and avoidance. Mia kept to herself, speaking only when directly called on by the teachers. During lunch, she hid in the bathroom stall, unable to face the crowded cafeteria or the questioning looks from her friends. By the time the final bell rang, she felt exhausted, as if she'd run a marathon rather than sat through classes. As Mia walked home, her phone in her pocket completely full of unanswered messages, she wondered how long she could go on like this. The anxiety that had started out as a small undertone had grown into a gigantic roar, drowning out everything else in her life. Her world, once full of friends and activities and dreams for the future, had shrunk to a small, lonely space. And as much as it hurt, as much as she missed her old life, the thought of reaching out, of trying to reclaim what she had lost, felt impossibly daunting. Arriving home, Mia headed straight to her room, closing the door on the concerned faces of her parents. She curled up on her bed, hugging her knees to her chest, feeling both utterly exhausted and completely on edge. As the afternoon light faded into evening, Mia remained there, trapped in a prison, unsure of how to break free. As our time together comes to a close, I want to thank you for joining us at Storyloft. These 3 stories we've shared about people living with anxiety remind us of the quiet strength we all carry within. To each person watching, whether these stories reflect your own experiences or have opened your heart to others, Your presence here is a gift. You've helped create a gentle, understanding space just by listening. Storyloft is a peaceful corner where we can share our truths without fear. If you have a story you would like to share, we are here to listen with open hearts. You can reach us at storyloft@outlook.com. You'll find this address waiting in the description below. When you like and subscribe, you're not just supporting a channel, you're helping to grow a community of kindness. Each small action ripples outwards, potentially reaching someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. As we part ways, remember that your journey with all its challenges and triumphs is deeply meaningful. You matter, and your presence in this world is important. Be gentle with yourself. Know that we're here holding a quiet space for you whenever you need to return. Until next time, may you find moments of peace and know that you are cared for just as you are.